At my daughter's wedding, she stood at the microphone, smiled sweetly at the crowd, and called me broke. What she didn't know was that I was hiding a fortune, and a secret that would turn her perfect little world upside down. The sound of champagne glasses clinking together should have been the music of joy, but for me, that night it became the beginning of a silence I never thought I would carry. My daughter's wedding. The day I had dreamed of. The day I had promised myself I would let her shine without interruption, without distraction. I wanted the spotlight to be hers, not mine. I wanted to sit quietly, watch her walk down that aisle, and know that all of my sacrifices, every sleepless night and every compromise, had led to this single radiant moment. The church had been filled with flowers, roses, lilies, and small white orchids placed on every pew. I had chosen not to say a word about who had paid for most of it. I hadn't told anyone, not even my closest friends, that behind those flowers, behind the string quartet softly playing as she entered, behind the ornate lace on her gown, there was me. My savings. My hands. My fortune. A fortune that had been carefully protected, hidden even, for reasons that would not make sense to most. That I sat at the edge of the aisle, watching Sarah glide forward, her arm looped through her new husband Michael's. The hall was silent except for the occasional sniffle of someone moved to tears. My heart was proud. My eyes burned with emotion. And yet, I stayed quiet. Because I wanted this day to be hers. Not about my history. Not about my struggles. Not about the wealth that everyone seemed to speculate on but no one truly knew. When the vows were spoken, my chest tightened with love and a small ache of loneliness. Her father, Frank, my late husband, wasn't here to see this. I whispered his name in my mind as though he could hear it, as though somehow he was standing beside me, proud of the young woman we had raised together. But the night took a turn I will never forget. It was during the speeches, when the clinking glasses had gone quiet and everyone's attention was fixed on the microphone at the center of the reception hall. Sarah stood there, her veil pushed back, a glowing smile on her face. She raised her glass to thank everyone for being there, to honor the people who had supported her journey. She looked at Michael's parents and praised their generosity. She thanked her friends for being there through all of her ups and downs. And then when she turned to me, her smile faltered. "My mom," she began, her voice trembling with what I assumed at first was emotion. "Well, she tried. She really did. But we all know she's not exactly rolling in money. She's had her struggles, and we've always joked about how broke she is." The hall filled with uncomfortable laughter, the kind that stabs at you because it carries pity hidden in its humor. "And yet," Sarah continued, "she still gave what little she could to help. Even though it wasn't much, it meant a lot." I froze. Every breath in my body caught in my throat. Every drop of warmth drained from my face. The hall echoed with that word, broke. She had called me broke. In front of everyone. At her wedding. Nobody knew that beneath my silence lay a carefully guarded fortune. Money that Frank and I had built together and money I had protected like a lioness with her cubs. It wasn't public. It wasn't something I flaunted. But it was there. And to hear her speak those words as though I were some fragile, penniless woman who barely scraped by. It was a betrayal I didn't know how to process. That I smiled anyway. My lips curved upward though my heart was breaking. I refused to let the humiliation show. But inside the memories poured back. Every time I had sacrificed, every time I had swallowed my pride so that she could stand taller. The rest of her speech blurred. The laughter from the audience, the claps, the photographs, it all became noise. I stared at the tablecloth, tracing the patterns of the embroidery just to keep my hands from trembling. When the reception ended and people came to hug me, offering shallow compliments like, "You must be so proud," I nodded and smiled, but inside I knew a shift had happened. The foundation between Sarah and me had cracked. And I couldn't stop thinking about Frank. If he had been alive, would she have dared? Would she have stood up there and painted me as a woman defined by lack, by absence, by weakness? That night, when I returned to my room, I stared at the mirror for hours. I thought about all the times I had chosen silence. Silence about the investments Frank and I had made. Silence about the land we had kept in our name. Silence about the trust that was carefully guarded. I thought about the night Frank had told me, "Keep it safe. Don't ever feel pressured to prove yourself with it. People will show their true colors when they think you have nothing." And he was right. My daughter's words echoed. "She's broke." I replayed it again and again. And with each replay my decision became clearer. I had been quiet for too long. My silence had protected me, but it had also given people permission to define me. And my own daughter, the one person I had thought would know me beyond material possessions, had chosen to define me in front of hundreds of eyes as a woman of poverty. But the truth? I wasn't broke. Not by a long shot. I could have written a check that night to cover every flower, every meal, every band member, every light in that hall. I could have written a check that would have made the entire wedding an afterthought. But I hadn't, because I wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet. And yet, she had taken my silence and painted it as weakness. The next morning, I received texts from relatives. Some were sympathetic, others filled with gossip. Don't worry, she didn't mean it. She was just nervous. Everyone knows you've struggled. They all believed it now that I sat at my kitchen table, my coffee growing cold. And for the first time in years, I opened the drawer where Frank's letters were kept. I held the last one he had written me, the one he had sealed before his passing. The ink had faded, but his words were carved into my memory. Protect the truth until the truth protects you. Don't reveal what you have until silence becomes a wound. That night, silence had cut me open, and I folded the letter back into its envelope and realized that what my daughter thought she knew about me was about to change. But I didn't want to lash out in anger. That would only create more distance. I needed to wait, to listen, to let her reveal more of what she truly felt. Because sometimes what people say in the light of celebration hides deeper truths they've been carrying in the shadows. And I was determined to uncover it. The next week, Sarah invited me to lunch. Perhaps she thought it would smooth things over. Perhaps she thought I had been too fragile to be truly hurt. I accepted the invitation, but inside I knew this wasn't just lunch. This was the beginning of the unraveling. The cafe Sarah had chosen was one of those sleek, modern places where everything looked curated for Instagram. Polished marble tables, oversized lattes topped with delicate foam art, and conversations that hovered just loud enough to be heard but never truly intimate. I sat near the window, my hands folded neatly on my lap, rehearsing the words I thought I might need. But no rehearsal could have prepared me for what my daughter was about to say. She arrived 10 minutes late, her heels clicking against the tiled floor, her expression framed by a smile that was polite but not warm. She hugged me briefly, the kind of hug one gives out of obligation rather than desire, and slid into the chair across from me. "Thanks for meeting me, Mom," she began, scanning the menu as though the words she was about to say were casual, as though they wouldn't pierce straight through me. That I nodded. Of course. I was looking forward to it. The waitress came, took our orders, and left. Silence lingered between us until Sarah finally leaned forward. "I've been thinking a lot since the wedding," she said carefully, her tone rehearsed. "About your future. About how we can make sure you're taken care of." I frowned slightly. "Taken care of?" "Yes," she replied, placing her hand over mine in a gesture that might have seemed tender to an outsider but to me felt staged. "Mom, you're getting older. You shouldn't be living alone. It's not safe. Michael and I were talking, and we think it's time you consider assisted living." The words dropped like stones into the space between us. "Assisted living?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. She nodded, sipping her latte. "Yes, it's not a bad thing. Lots of people your age move into beautiful communities where they don't have to worry about bills or safety. You'd have people around, activities, everything. You wouldn't have to manage the house anymore. And honestly, Mom, it's time." I stared at her, my mind racing. Here she was, my daughter, speaking to me as though I were already gone, as though I were a fragile relic to be stored away for safekeeping. She hadn't asked me what I wanted. She hadn't considered that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't ready to hand over my independence. But before I could respond, she continued. "There's another thing," she said, lowering her voice. "We need to talk about Dad's inheritance. About the money. I know there isn't much, but whatever's left, we should probably start planning. Michael and I have been struggling with the mortgage, and with the baby we're planning for." She trailed off, waiting for my reaction. Her words hit harder than the ones at her wedding. Not only had she stood on a stage and declared me broke, but now she was asking, no, assuming, that what she believed to be my limited inheritance should be hers. That my silence equaled emptiness. That my worth could be measured in what I could hand over to her. I sipped my coffee slowly, giving myself time. Frank's words echoed in my mind again. Protect the truth until silence becomes a wound. The wound was open now, bleeding freely. I placed my cup down and smiled faintly. Sarah, I appreciate your concern.
Truly, Ido.
But I'm not ready to move into assisted living. I still have my health, my independence, my home. As for your father's inheritance, it's not something we need to rush into discussing. Her eyes narrowed, disappointment flickering across her face. Mom, you don't understand. This isn't about you. This is about family. About making smart decisions. If you wait too long, there won't be anything left. You've never been good with money. We all know that. The words stung, not because they were true, but because she believed them. She believed the facade I had allowed her to believe. That I leaned back in my chair, my smile gone. Sarah, you don't know everything about me. Or about your father. She rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. Mom, please. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. For the rest of lunch, I listened as she laid out her vision for my life. The facility she thought I should move into, the way my house could be sold to free me of responsibility, the way my so-called inheritance could be managed better under her and Michael's care. Every word was a reminder that the daughter I thought I knew, the daughter I had raised to be compassionate, was now looking at me as a resource to be allocated, not as her mother. When the check arrived, she pushed it toward me without hesitation. You've got this, right? She asked, almost as an afterthought. That I paid it silently, watching her gather her things, watching her walk out with the same heels that had clicked arrogantly when she entered. And as I sat there alone, the truth crystallized inside me. That it wasn't just her speech at the wedding. It wasn't just her words at lunch. It was the slow unveiling of who she really was when she thought I had nothing to offer. But she was wrong. That I wasn't broke. I wasn't helpless. And I wasn't about to let her dictate my future. The wound of silence had bled enough. Now it was time for the truth to speak. The tension had been building for weeks. Every phone call with Sarah carried a sharper edge. Every interaction left behind invisible bruises. I had stayed quiet, biting back the truth, waiting for the right moment. But silence has a way of rotting from the inside out, and soon it demanded release. That moment came one Saturday afternoon, when Sarah invited me to her house for what she called a family meeting. I knew the words before she spoke them. I knew the conversation before it even began. She wanted control. Of me, of my future, of Frank's legacy. I walked into her living room. Its carefully arranged furniture staged like a showroom. Michael sat on one couch, his laptop perched on his knees. Sarah stood near the mantel, her arms folded across her chest. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and tension. Mom, she began, gesturing for me to sit. We need to talk about some important decisions. It's time. I sat down slowly, my hands resting in my lap. All right.
I'm listening.
Michael cleared his throat, glancing at Sarah before speaking. We've been looking into options for you. There's a wonderful assisted living facility called Meadowbrook Estates. It's safe, comfortable, and honestly, Meadowbrook. I interrupted, my brows knitting together. I've heard of it. Yes, Sarah said quickly, her tone firm. It's one of the best. And the sooner you move there, the easier everything will be for all of us. For all of us, I repeated, letting the words linger. Sarah pressed on. We also think it's time to settle Dad's estate. Whatever is left needs to be handled responsibly. Michael has experience managing finances and, that's enough, I said sharply, my voice cutting through the room like glass shattering. They both froze, staring at me as though I had spoken in a foreign tongue. I had never raised my voice like that before. But the moment had arrived that I reached into my handbag and pulled out a worn envelope, its edges softened by years of being opened and closed. I placed it on the table between us. This, I said, my voice steady, is your father's letter. His last words to me. And to you. Sarah's eyes flickered with surprise. She leaned forward cautiously, as though the paper might burn her. What do you mean? I slid the envelope toward her but didn't release it. For years I kept quiet. I protected what your father and I built. But you? I looked directly into her eyes, my voice trembling with restrained anger. You stood at your wedding and called me broke. You sat across from me at lunch and tried to dictate my future. You think you know me, Sarah, but you don't. And it's time you learned the truth. Her face flushed crimson. Mom, that's not what I... Read it, I said firmly, finally letting go of the envelope with trembling fingers. Sarah pulled out the letter. Michael leaned closer, his eyes scanning as she read aloud. My dearest, if you are holding this, it means I am gone. Know that I trusted you with everything we built because I knew you had the strength to protect it. Our investments, our land, our savings, they are safe because of you. Do not let anyone pressure you into giving them up. People will show their true nature when they think you have nothing. Wait until the time comes, and the truth will protect you as you once protected it. Sarah's voice faltered, her eyes darting nervously toward me. Dad said investments? Savings? What does this mean? I leaned back, my gaze unwavering. It means, Sarah, that I am not the woman you painted me to be. I am not broke. I am not helpless. Everything you thought you knew about me was built on assumptions and my silence. But your father and I built a fortune, and I protected it. Michael sat back, his mouth slightly open. Are you saying you're wealthy? I tilted my head. I'm saying I'm not what you think. Silence fell, thick and heavy. And then I dropped the final blow. As for Meadowbrook Estates, I continued, my tone sharp, it isn't what you think it is. It's a scam. A financial trap disguised as a sanctuary. I've seen the reports. Residents drained of their life savings, families left with nothing. And you were ready to send me there? To sign away my independence and my money. Sarah's eyes widened. That's not true. I pulled out a folder I had tucked beneath the letter, spreading papers across the coffee table. Articles, reviews, hidden lawsuits. The evidence was undeniable. Michael leaned forward, his face paling as he skimmed the documents. Sarah, she's right. This place has been investigated. People lost everything. Sarah's breath caught. I didn't know. I thought, Michael said. Her words trailed off into silence, shame flickering in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of silence lifting from me. You see, I said softly, my voice no longer angry but firm. Silence can protect, but it can also wound. And I will not be wounded by you anymore. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, threatening to spill. Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought you needed me. I shook my head. What I needed was respect. What I needed was honesty. What I needed was my daughter to see me, not as a burden, not as a bank account, but as her mother. The room was heavy with emotion. Michael leaned back, silent now, while Sarah covered her face with her hands, and for the first time she whispered the truth. I was scared, Mom. Scared that if you didn't have anything, then I'd have to carry everything. I didn't want to admit it. I thought it would be easier to believe you were weak than to face my own fears. Her words pierced me, not because they justified her actions, but because they revealed the fragility beneath her cruelty. She wasn't just greedy. She was terrified. That I stood slowly, gathering the papers back into the folder. Your father trusted me for a reason, and I trust myself for a reason. If you want to repair this, Sarah, it starts with honesty. Nothing less. As I walked toward the door, I heard her voice, small and broken. I'm sorry, Mom. But apologies are like seeds. They mean nothing until they are nurtured into growth. I left that house knowing the war between silence and truth had only just begun. The city was alive that morning, but inside me, silence pressed like a weight. I walked slowly toward the small cafe near the library, a place chosen not for comfort but for neutrality. It was safe ground, Sarah had insisted, a space where neither of us could claim the upper hand. When I entered, I saw her immediately. My daughter. The same daughter who had once stood at her wedding and humiliated me in front of 100 people. The same daughter who had schemed to place me in Meadowbrook, a place I now knew was nothing more than a polished scam. But today, Sarah looked different. The sharp lines of her composure were blurred. Her hair, usually pinned to perfection, fell in soft waves around her face. Her makeup was lighter, her eyes tired, rimmed with the evidence of sleepless nights she was cracking. And for the first time in years, I saw not the polished strategist she wanted the world to believe she was, but my child scared and lost. Mom, she said softly as I slid into the chair across from her. No preamble, no sarpegis. Just my name. I nodded. Sarah. She clasped her hands around the coffee cup as though it were the only thing tethering her to the present. I've been thinking about what you said, about not asking what you wanted, about treating you like a problem instead of a person. Her voice trembled. I stayed quiet, letting her find her footing. I talked to a therapist, she confessed suddenly, her words tumbling out before she could take them back. I needed perspective. She asked me when I first became afraid of you aging. Her eyes filled, but she didn't blink them away. It was when Dad got sick. Watching you take care of him, it terrified me. Because I realized that no matter how much you love someone, it doesn't stop them from getting sick, from dying. And all I could think was, one day it'll be you. And I didn't think I could do it, Mom. I didn't think I was strong enough. Her confession hit me like a wave. All the anger I'd carried, all the sharp words I'd prepared softened at the edges. This wasn't manipulation. This was fear. Pure, unpolished fear. So you convinced yourself to push me into Meadowbrook, I said quietly. Because someone else could do it better? She nodded, tears finally breaking free. Yes. Someone professional. Someone who wouldn't fail you the way I thought I would. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. Sarah, no one expects you to be a professional caregiver. No one. But being a daughter doesn't mean controlling. It means being there. It means asking. It means respect. She nodded rapidly, wiping her eyes with the thin napkin. The therapist said I was treating you like you were already gone, like you couldn't be part of your own future. And she was right. Silence stretched between us. But this silence was different. Not heavy with shame, not poisonous with secrets. This was the silence of reflection, of wounds beginning to air. For the first time, I could see the child I had raised, hidden beneath layers of fear and control. The child who once held my hand in crowded stores, who begged me to braid her hair before school. What about Patricia? I asked carefully. And Michael? Sarah's mouth twisted. Michael. He was horrified when he finally understood what we were planning. He said it reminded him of the way his grandfather's business partners tried to trick him when he was sick. He said it felt predatory. I nodded slowly. And Patricia? Sarah gave a bitter laugh. She still calls it the Dorothy situation, as if it were some embarrassing problem to sweep under the rug. She thinks the whole thing was blown out of proportion. Despite myself, I chuckled. At least she's consistent. Sarah's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for calling you a failure, for treating you like a burden. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sarah, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to see me. Not as a problem. Not as a task to manage. As a person. As your mother. Her grip tightened, desperate. Deal. But Mom, if you ever do need real help, not just the normal aging things, will you tell me? Will you let me be part of the solution, instead of shutting me out? I thought about Frank's letter, about how he had warned me of her schemes. I thought about the danger I had escaped, but I also thought about the daughter he had raised, the daughter who was finally painfully learning. Yes, I said at last. I'll tell you. But Sarah, being part of the solution means respecting my choices, even if they aren't the choices you'd make. She swallowed hard. I understand. For the first time in months, maybe years, I believed her dead as we gathered our things to leave. Sarah hesitated, her voice soft. Mom, about Dad's letter. I'm glad he wrote it. Not because of what it said about me, but because it meant that even after he was gone, he was still protecting you. I hope one day I can love someone like that. I froze, the words sinking deep. That it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something even rarer, understanding. 6 months later, the world outside my window was blooming again. Spring had painted everything fresh, and yet it was the quiet changes inside me that felt more alive than the blossoms on the trees. That I had not gone back to Meadowbrook. I never would. Instead, I had chosen something radical, something my younger self might have dismissed. I had chosen to live on my own terms, not in fear, not in resentment, but in quiet defiance of the roles others tried to place on me. Sarah called more often now. Sometimes daily, sometimes less. But it was never with the cold efficiency of before. No more lists. No more solutions. Sometimes she would just call to ask what I had for lunch, or if I'd watched a certain show. Seemed trivial, but to me it was monumental. It was connection, simple and unpolished. One Sunday afternoon, as I watered the flowers on my porch, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A sleek black car pulled into the drive, and for a moment my heart stuttered. Sarah had said she might visit, but the car door that opened belonged not to her, but to Michael. He stepped out, casual in a button-down and jeans, but his face was set with determination. "Mrs. Carter," he greeted, but then paused. "Dorothy. I should call you Dorothy." I raised an eyebrow. "That might be a good start." He smiled sheepishly. "May I come in?" Inside, he paced for a moment before finally speaking. "I need to say something I should have said months ago."
I'm sorry.
I tilted my head. "For what exactly?" "For being complicit," he admitted. "For standing beside Sarah when she was pushing Meadowbrook, even when I knew something about it felt wrong. I told myself it was her family's decision, that I should respect her wishes. But the truth? I was afraid to speak up. Afraid of rocking the boat so close to our wedding." His words hung heavy in the room. I remembered his silence at the reception, his discomfort, his avoidance. "You were afraid of her," I said quietly. "Yes," he admitted, shame plain in his eyes. But watching what happened afterward, I realized that being silent was worse than disagreeing. "I left you alone in that fight, and I regret it deeply." I studied him carefully. For months, I had wondered whether Michael had simply been another piece in Sarah's controlling puzzle. But now I saw a man learning too, a man trying to stand differently than before. "I appreciate your honesty," I said at last. "But apologies only mean something if they change behavior." He nodded firmly. "I know. And I intend to prove it." That was the first of many visits. Sometimes Sarah came with him, sometimes she didn't. But little by little, I saw the cracks in their marriage beginning to fill with something sturdier than fear. Truth, at a family dinner one evening, Sarah turned to me suddenly. "Mom, do you remember the summer I wanted to quit piano lessons, and you made me stick it out?" I smiled faintly. "Yes. You cried for weeks, but by the end of it, you could play Beethoven without flinching." She nodded. "At the time I thought you were being cruel. But now, I get it. You weren't teaching me piano. You were teaching me endurance." I think about that a lot lately. Her eyes glistened, and I realized this was her way of saying thank you. Clumsy, roundabout, but real Patricia, of course, remained Patricia. When she visited, she still sniffed at my kitchen, still insisted on telling me which doctor all the women at her club were using. But even she had begun to tread more carefully, perhaps sensing that I was no longer an easy target for her disguised barbs. And then one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the house in gold, Sarah sat across from me, her voice trembling but steady. "Mom, I want you to know something. That day at the wedding when I called you broke, I thought I was being clever. I thought it was witty, a jab no one would take too seriously. But it wasn't witty. It was cruel. And I've replayed it in my head 100 times since." I let her words linger. I could see the pain etched into her face, the way she twisted her hands in her lap. "Do you forgive me?" she whispered. Forgiveness. Such a heavy word. For months I had asked myself whether it was even possible. Could betrayal be erased by apology? Could humiliation be softened by time? I took a long breath. Sarah, forgiveness isn't a door that opens and closes. It's a road. And I'm willing to walk it with you. But it means no more lies. No more control. If you want my forgiveness, it will be in the small things. In listening. In respecting. In being my daughter, not my warden. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. Deal. For the first time since her wedding day, I pulled her into my arms. And though the hug was awkward, stiff with the weight of all we had survived, it was real. That night after she left, I sat alone in my quiet house, Frank's letter tucked safely in the drawer. I thought about how he had worried for me, how he had feared Sarah's ambition would swallow me whole, but I also thought about the choice I had made, to fight, to speak, to remain whole. And in that moment I realized something vital. I had not only saved myself, I had saved my daughter too. The seasons turned again. Leaves drifted down from the trees, covering the ground in gold and rust. Life had a way of circling back, of reminding us that nothing, neither pain nor joy, was permanent. That I had learned that truth the hard way. That it had been nearly a year since Sarah's wedding. Nearly a year since I stood humiliated in front of 100 strangers, called broke by the very daughter I had raised. Nearly a year since I uncovered the plot to silence me, to strip me of my choices, to bury me quietly in a polished cage called Meadowbrook, and yet, here I was. Still standing. Still living. Still me. The road between Sarah and me hadn't been smooth. Some days she slipped, retreating into her old ways, organizing my appointments without asking, suggesting better doctors, gently hinting about senior living brochures. But the difference was this: now I had a voice. And I used it. "No, Sarah," I would say, firm but calm. "That's not what I want." And sometimes she bristled. Sometimes she snapped. But each time she came back. Each time she apologized. Each time she learned that IT wasn't perfection. It was progress. Michael proved true to his word as well. He became my unlikely ally, often calling just to check in. Sometimes he asked my opinion on things Sarah wouldn't: how to invest in a property, how to negotiate a contract. He said my advice saved him from 2 very costly mistakes. I laughed the first time he told me. "And here your wife thought I was nothing but a burden." His smile was rueful. "She doesn't think that anymore." Even Patricia, though still sharp-tongued, began to soften. One evening at dinner, after Sarah had left the room, Patricia leaned toward me and whispered, "You're stronger than I gave you credit for, Dorothy. I may not admit it often, but you were right to fight back." It was the closest thing to respect I would ever get from her. And oddly enough, it was enough. But the biggest shift of all came quietly, unexpectedly, one Saturday afternoon. Sarah and I were sitting on my porch sipping tea. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, and for a moment we were simply mother and daughter, not adversaries, not rivals. She set her cup down and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. "Mom," she said softly, "I've been thinking. I want to start a family. And I don't want to make the same mistakes with my children that I made with you. I want them to know love without conditions, support without control." Her words pierced me, deeper than any apology could, because they weren't about the past, they were about the future. That I reached over, covering her hand with mine. "Then you've already learned the most important lesson." She squeezed back, her eyes shining. "Because of you." In that moment, I knew Frank's fears had not come true. His daughter had not destroyed me. His daughter had not won the war of control. Instead, she had been forced, through confrontation, through truth, through love, to change. And I, the woman once labeled a failure, once humiliated at a wedding speech, once nearly silenced, had been the one to show her the way. That night, as I prepared for bed, I pulled Frank's letter from the drawer once more. His words were etched into my memory, but I read them anyway. "Protect yourself. Don't let her take your choices away." I smiled through tears. "I did, Frank. I did more than that. I gave her back her own choices too." For the first time in a long while, I slept without the weight of fear pressing on my chest. Because I had learned something powerful: silence may keep the peace. Silence may avoid the fight. But silence also hands over your voice, your dignity, your freedom. And I had taken mine back. So if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of humiliation, if someone dares to strip you of your worth, remember this: you are not powerless. You are not voiceless. You are not broken. I kept quiet for too long. But when I finally spoke, when I finally fought, I not only reclaimed myself, I changed the story for generations to come. And that, more than fortune, more than pride, more than vengeance, was the greatest victory of all. I thought losing my voice meant losing everything. But I learned the opposite. Speaking up saved not only me, it saved my daughter too. So tell me, how long would you stay silent before taking your life back?